everybody, welcome to Catherine Sews. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I want to show you how you can make an awesome messenger bag with a matching pencil case and how you can do it with zero waste. It looks a little bit intimidating for beginners, but honestly, it's all straight seams and it's step by step. I'm going to show you really nice and clear instructions, so even as a beginner, you can totally do this. Now, the pencil case, which you get out of the same piece of fabric here for your zero waste. Watch the beginning part of this video where I show you how to cut it all out with zero waste, and then pause this video, go and watch the pencil case video, make this, and then come back. You'll have all the skills you need to be able to sew your zipper in and to box your corners. The messenger bag has two zippers, one on the front flap. Flap doubles as a pocket. It also has the pocket on the back with a zipper, so it's a double pocket, and it has an adjustable strap. It also has a nice lining, which you can make out of any fabric you want. So it's a pretty great bag, and matching with the pencil case, it's pretty sweet. Okay, so to make this book bag with zero waste, you combine your fabric to make also the pencil case. So I use fabric that is 60 inches or 150 centimeters wide, and one piece that's 46 inches or 117 centimeters long is going to actually give you enough for 2 book bags and 2 pencil cases. So this is fantastic for teachers because that's enough for 2 students. It's also good for people who are wanting to make these in bulk or just make one for themselves and one for a friend. So each length of 46 inches or 117 centimeters gives you 2 book bags and 2 pencil cases. Okay, got it? This also only works if you don't mind that the flap is going to be cut on the cross grain. So let's say if you have a stripe, your stripe's going to be going up and down on everything else, but on the flap it's going to be going across. So if you're okay with that, that's just the one little sacrifice you have to make this 100% zero waste. So other than your normal sewing supplies like your sewing machine, your pins, your scissors, you're going to need one piece of a heavy like cotton or canvas, denim, corduroy, that kind of like heavier weight fabric. Then you're going to need a piece of lining for the bag, the same measurement that we'll be cutting for the main bag. So that's 45 by 80 centimeters or 18 by 31 inches. You'll need some of this polypropylene webbing. This is 1 inch wide, and you'll need 150 centimeters or 60 inches. And you'll need 2 zippers that are at least, now extra long is good, but you'll need them at least 32 and 40 centimeters or 13 inches and 16 inches at least, but extra long is easier. Make sure your zippers are the soft nylon coil like this. If it's a heavy plastic or if it's metal, it won't work for this project. You have to be able to cut and sew through, so the nylon coil is important. You'll need 2 of these webbing sliders and your matching thread and bobbin. And you'll need a tape measure. So once you've got all of your materials gathered, you're going to take your large piece, and as the teacher I would do this for my students, but I'm just going to find the center of this piece. I'm just bringing the 2 selvages together, find the center there, and we're going to use the snip and tear technique for this whole project. So I just put a good long snip, and then, so that makes 2. I'm going to be cutting this fabric into 5 rectangles. I'm going to leave the selvage intact here because that's going to orient me for all of the measuring here. I'm going to start by making sure my piece is 29 inches wide. Now this piece is a little extra wide, so I'm going to be tearing off 2 inches, and I'm going to tear it off not on the selvage side but on the other side, just so I don't get myself disoriented when I make my future snips. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so there. So this is actually the only bit of waste, but you could actually use that for part of your strap if you wanted to. So now my piece is exactly 29 inches wide by 46 inches long, or 73 centimeters by 117 centimeters. For the flat piece, I'm going to measure up from the bottom 15 inches or 37 centimeters. And that's going to be the first tear I make, is straight across there. So I'm tearing this perpendicular to the selvage. So there's my flat piece. It's 73 by 37 centimeters or 29 by 15 inches. So then, still with the selvage on my left so I don't get disoriented, I'm going to be measuring over this way 45 centimeters or 18 inches. I'll just snip right in there. And that's my second tear. So this is for the main bag, and that is now 45 by 80 centimeters or 18 inches by 31 inches. This is the piece that I have left, and I'm going to be cutting it into the pencil case and the little pencil case handle and the pocket piece for the messenger bag. So for the pencil case, I want 28 centimeters or 11 inches. And for the little strap or the handle or loop on the pencil case, I just want 2 inches by this 11. And then what's left is my pocket piece for the messenger bag. So this piece is now 28 centimeters by 45 or 11 inches by 18 inches. Good, so you can see now that you end up with all of your rectangles and squares. There's no waste, and it's pretty quick to cut it. So sometimes you'll find that fabric is woven a little bit off grain. If I compare this square to the blue lines on my table, you can see that it's not exactly square. It's lined up with the blue lines on the sides, but not on the ends. My tear is straight. Fabric always tears right between two yarns on the fabric, but it's woven a little bit off grain. If it looks like it's been stretched from one corner to the other, it looks like it's been stretched this way, you're going to take it the opposite two corners and you'll stretch it back onto grain. So for any of your rectangles that look like they've been stretched one direction, you're just going to stretch it in the other direction until it comes back onto grain. There we go. Now that's a perfect square. Good. Good. So the two smaller pieces are what you use to make the pencil case from my last video. If you haven't checked out that one, watch that now and then come back. So now for the messenger bag, we've got 3 pieces here. The big one is the main bag, the medium one is the flap, and the small one is the pocket. So the only thing I still need is the lining, and I want the lining to be exactly the same size as the main bag. One thing to keep in mind with snipping and tearing is that you can only be accurate if you're measuring from a torn edge. Can you see that this line is not perfectly straight? It has been cut, and nobody can ever cut exactly between two yarns. So before I can even measure my piece, I need to tear off an end. Good. So you can see on this piece that I just tore off how wiggly it is. It goes from being quite wide to very skinny. It's the cut that was not straight. My tear has now made this piece straight, and now I can safely measure from it. If the selvage is woven very tight, or if it's a different color and you want to get it out of your way, go ahead and snip and tear off the selvage. I usually do on projects, but I think for this it's not going to be a problem, especially since that is the lining piece. I'm not bothered by that selvage. And the same goes on your main fabric. If the selvage looks different or is woven super tightly, then you might want to tear off the selvage. So now I can tear off here. So that's even this way and this way. Good. And I just tear until those tears meet and then cut. Okay, fantastic. There's my lining piece and my main bag piece. Those two pieces I'm going to put aside for now. We'll get back to them later. And we're going to just start with the pocket piece and the flat piece. That's what we'll start our sewing with. All right, we're ready to start sewing. So my first sewing step is going to be to zigzag or serge the two short ends of both of these rectangles, the pocket and the flat piece. And I just need to do the two short ends because that's where the zipper is going to go. Our machine's in my classroom. It's stitch number 7. I'd like to change the length to be 3. So it's 3 and 3 on stitch 7. So I have a bit of a fuzzy edge here because of tearing. That's totally fine. Basically, I want my needle to be going on the fabric and off and on the fabric and off. Don't forget back tacks at the beginning and end. Now it's time to sew on the zippers. We're jumping right into the deep end here. So I'm switching to a zipper foot. I'll pop that one off. And then my zipper foot I want on the left. Put it onto the left side and switch to stitch 2 now. Stitch 2 on our machines is just a regular straight stitch, but it moves the needle over to the left. Can you see that? And it just brings your needle a little closer to your zipper. So now I want to line up the top of my zipper tape, line up the end of your zipper tape with the edge of your flap or pocket piece. Doesn't matter which one you do first. What does matter is you want to get the right side of your zipper, right sides together with the right side of your flap or pocket piece. So I'm going to pin that. I always want to see that zigzagged edge, because if I go over it a little bit, I don't know if I've lost it completely. So just pin so that you're always seeing that zigzagged edge. Now my zipper is really, really long. That is just going to make the next step a little bit easier for me. Good. So now I'm going to be sewing just to the right of my zipper, kind of in the middle of the zipper tape here. The zipper foot allows me to sew right beside the zipper. If you get stuck at the beginning, often with a zipper foot, you just don't have enough pressure on the fabric, and so your machine just can't move it along. So that just did a bunch of stitches in one spot. Don't let it do too many because you'll get a tangle. Instead, just lift up, give it a little wiggle, move it along, and continue. That slider's in my way, just move it along, get it out of your way. And if your zipper's extra long, that's when you're going to be glad, because you can move it right off of your edge. You don't have to navigate around it at all. Back tack right at the end. Good. Now I like to zip it back up just so I don't get myself mixed up when I go to do the other side. So this is now the new right side of my piece. And now I'm folding it right sides together again. It's basically the same thing, right? But you can get yourself a little bit mixed up here if you're not careful. So zip it back up, place it. I remember I want the end equal with this edge. That selvage is woven a little bit differently, so I could have just cut it off and zigzag there. That would be fine. But I'm just going to move it in from the edge a little bit, just so when I sew this, it's going to look the same on the outside. So I just want it to be in that amount. If you find it easier to just snip and tear off your selvage and then zigzag that edge, that's 100% fine too. Good, so these edges are also lined up. And then the same thing this way now. And I can move that slider right out of my way again. I could have done that at the beginning, would have been smart. But with that, with my needle down and the zipper foot up, I can just slide it there. No problem. Just want to make sure I don't see that selvage anywhere. I definitely don't want to see the zigzagging on the outside. So if you have anything like that to fix, go ahead and fix it now before we do the next step. That was my flap. I'm going to sew the zipper onto the pocket piece in exactly the same way before I change my settings and do an edge stitch. So same way, edges get lined up here. I want to see the zigzagged edge. And straight stitch here, still zipper foot, still stitch 2 with my needle over to the left. Zip it back up. That's your new right side. You're going to bring it together with the other end of the pocket. Good. Lining up my ends here. And then before I unzip the zipper again, I want to make sure my ends are lining up on this side as well. And then a pin in between. Awesome. So both zippers are on, they're straight, they look good, and now I want to be able to do an edge stitch right beside my zipper. So 2 things. I'm going to switch my zipper foot to the other side. Now on stitch 2, your needle would hit that. So you have to switch back to stitch 1 or bring your needle back over to the right. Then I'm going to be able to do my edge stitch here. It's the fabric that folds. The zipper lays flat. Don't fold your zipper. My zipper foot is going to be coming right down beside the teeth, and you'll see the fabric can get built up here, and sometimes it gets pushed along and makes funny puckers. So you'll leave your needle down, lift up your presser foot, and just ease the fabric back. Okay, and then same thing on the other piece. Good. So can you see that edge stitch nice and close to the zipper and hopefully nice and straight? And when you close up your zipper, you've got your 2 parallel lines of edge stitching even on both sides of the zipper. If you want to do an embroidery on the flap, this is your last chance to do it, because we have to get a flat piece into the embroidery machine. Once you sew the sides of your pocket or flap, you can no longer get it into the embroidery machine. And now I'm done with the zipper foot for this whole project. I won't need that again. So I'll switch back to the regular presser foot. So we've got the zipper sewn onto the flap and the pocket, and we've got them both inside out. Now when you lay it inside out, if your zipper looks like it's sitting crooked on this piece, it's because you've got more stretching to do to bring it back on grain. So if it looks like it's stretched this way, then you're gonna stretch it the other way. Okay, do what you need to do is stretch to get it so that the zipper looks like it's straight across. Good. Now on the flap, we want the zipper sitting down about 3 inches from the top. Okay, so I've got the edge of the zipper taped 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters from the top. And on the pocket, we want the zipper about 2 inches or 5 centimeters from the top. So the main thing though, it should just be straight. Okay, good. I'm going to put a pin at the top of the zipper, but I want to open up that zipper a bit to have a space to turn it right side out later, and also to move that slider out of the way. Just keep your teeth together and put a second pin there. Good. Same on this one. I want to open up the zipper a little, but pin those 2 closed. Pin them so that the 2 edges of the zipper are still just touching. And pin the other side as well. The pocket piece is easy. We're just going to be sewing the 2 ends at the 15 line or the 5/8 line, and then zigzagging the edges. But on the flap, we're going to be angling it in, and the reason we want to angle in the top of the flap is just so it makes some space around where the strap is going to be. So we're just going to be creating that little angle here. I'll be sewing at the 15 line here. That's going to be normal, but at the top I want to come in about 2 inches, angling from the zipper. So I'll be sewing on that line there. So following this line and then coming straight down at the 15 line or the 5/8 line. So it's 2 inches in, angling from the zipper to that 2-inch point. Good. Awesome. So we're just going to sew those sides. So regular presser foot and regular stitch 1, I'm going to be coming down this side at the 15 line. Don't forget back tacks at the beginning and end. Take out your pins as you get to them. And now because it's a nylon coil zipper, I can just sew right through those zipper teeth. Now coming up this way, because we lined up the ends of the zipper here, I don't have to worry about where those metal stoppers are. If I had my zipper hanging off the edge, those metal stoppers might be in my way now. So it's good to have all your edges lined up here. Now this is the flap, so I'm going to be sewing on that line, making my way back over to the 15 line or 5/8 line. Back tack at the bottom fold. On this side, because I always want to sew with the edge on my right, I'm going to be starting at that bottom fold. So now on both of them, I can cut off the extra zipper. So I'll cut off the zipper on both. Good. And on the flap, I'm going to cut off the extra fabric at this corner. And I just want to cut about a finger width away, from my sewing, not right beside the sewing. Leave that good. It's about the same amount of seam allowance all the way up. So you're leaving your 15 millimeters of seam allowance, or your 5/8 of an inch of seam allowance. Good. And switching back to zigzag stitch, I'm going to zigzag those edges now. Stitch number 7, 3 length and 3 width. Awesome. Okay, so if I've got any threads hanging around, I can get rid of those before I turn it right side out. Now, if your opening is not quite big enough to be able to comfortably turn that right side out, just on the back you'll feel that slider. You can just pinch it on the back and slide it along. Flip your pocket and your flap both right side out. And we want nice and pointy corners. To start, I just take that seam allowance and fold it flat, and then just poke out over it. That's a good start. If you have a point turner that looks like this, or a bamboo point turner, these are really handy to be able to just put that inside and poke out your seam allowance. See how this is in there? We don't want that at all. We want that all the way out, nice and pointy. And we don't want the seam allowance inside in a big lump. We just want it nice and flat like that. We don't really have to trim off any of this because it is a square shape going into a square shape of the same size, so we don't really have to trim it. We just want to have it neatly organized in there so it's not lumpy. Now, if you don't have one of these point turners, you can use closed up scissors. Not open scissors because it'll poke right through, but if your scissors are closed and if you are careful, you can gently poke out your corner with that. A dull pencil works as well, but just make sure it's dull, not pointy, so you don't poke right through. Good, we're going to take that to the iron in a second. Let's just do this one too. So again, I have to just pinch that slider, make a bigger opening, turn this right side out. Okay, the other place we want the edge to come right out is at the end of the zipper, like where we did that little pivot, or we moved from the 15 line to follow the line that we drew. We want to make sure that is completely out. We don't want that seam to be sitting in like that. Bring it right out. Good. Now, your edges on your pocket and the sides on the pocket should be a straight line. If it's not a straight line, it might just mean you've got more to bring out so that your seam is right on the edge. If it's angling in, push all the way out, because if you sewed it straight, it should look straight on the outside. Okay, let's take these to the iron. Heat, steam, and pressure to flatten these nicely out. Don't let your iron linger over the zipper teeth because they can melt. But you do want to make sure it's nice and flat. Now we want to get that seam right out. Do you see how it just naturally wants to fold in? It doesn't look nice. We want to get that seam right out to the edge. So these are both nice and flat now. So now I've got the big main bag piece, and I'm just looking at one end of it, and I'm going to be placing that pocket onto one end, and I want to have it equally spaced here and then about the same amount at the top. Good. And then I want about 5 pins, one at each corner, one pin in the middle here. So now I'm going to move that slider out of the way a little bit, and I'm going to sew just the 3 sides of this, again with that nice close edge stitching, starting with the back tack there, come down and pivot, pivot, and back tack at the top. We don't sew across the top because that's part of the pocket. It's kind of a double pocket. I'm going to take out my first pin before I even put my presser foot down, and then nice and close to the edge, back tack. Okay, and then the same situation, my metal stoppers are there. I want to be sewing close to the edge, so I want to be very mindful and come right in between. Now here, my metal stoppers are really close to where I'm going to be sewing, so I need to be just very mindful of that and come up in between them and the edge. Awesome. So there's the pocket connected to the main bag. I've got some threads to trim, but we're looking pretty good. And make sure your back tag comes right up to the top here, because that is a point of stress for your bag. You want to make sure your back tag right at the top. So I have my main bag with the pocket sewn on, and I've got my lining, and I'm going to fold them both up separately, but right sides together. There and here. Good. On the main bag now, we've got it right side together with the pocket on the inside, and we're just going to be sewing the two edges at the 15 line or 5/8 line. We don't even have to zigzag the edges because this is all going to be enclosed in the lining. So we're just sewing those two edges at the 15 line. Of course, we don't have to sew across the bottom because it's folded, it's already together. On the lining, same thing. We're going to be sewing at the 15 line. On one side of the lining, I want to leave a gap about the size of my hand, or about a third of the bag. And the center third is what we're going to leave open. Okay. And if your fabric doesn't want to come together, that's okay. You're the boss. You bring your corners together anyway. For the rest of the entire project, we're going to be on stitch 1, the regular straight stitch. So on this side, I'm going to sew all the way down to the bottom fold. But on this side is where I will leave a gap in the center third. So my back tack, and I'm just going to jump over and back tack again. And on the main bag, it's just both of them all the way down, no gap. At the ironing board now, we're going to put the whole bag right over the pointy end of the ironing board. So we're getting the pointy end of the ironing board as close as we can to the points of that seam. And then we want to press that seam open and flat. Okay, before I take it off the ironing board, we have it set up perfectly right here for boxing the corners. We've got this seam right in the middle of our triangle, just like we did at the pencil case. It's just a bigger version of that now. So I'm going to grab it like that, pull that off the board, but keep holding it there, and I'm going to put a pin perpendicular to this seam. We're going to be sewing these corners 2 inches from the point. So I'm going to press all of them like that and pin all of them like that. So if I want to sew this 2 inches or 5 centimeters from the needle, well, on this machine I've got a 2-inch line, 50 millimeters, same thing. And I can put my point way over there, and that's where I'm going to sew. I'm going to be sewing perpendicular to this line right across there. I'm going to be starting at the folded edge. My corner is lined up with that 2-inch or 50 millimeter mark. Also double check underneath that it's nice and flat. You haven't got any extra little folds in there. And we're going to sew all 4 of them like that. Now to get the bag and the lining right side together, I'm going to leave the lining inside out. So that's going to just stay like that. The main bag, I'm going to take and turn it right side out. So with the main bag right side out, I'm going to put it inside the lining. And that's another one of those situations where you're going to think, that can't be right, that's got to be wrong. But I promise you, it's right. So I'm going to do the bag inside the lining. Good. And I'm going to line up the seam of the lining to the seam of the bag, right sides together, and put a pin seam to seam there. Same with the other side, seam to seam. And at this point you want to check to make sure that they are fitting perfectly together. It should just fit together like that. If one of them is bigger than the other, if it's just a bit of a difference, then have the bigger one on the outside of your circle here. So if, let's say if this one was a bit bigger, I would flip it just like this. Flip the whole thing to have that on the outside. If it's a big difference though, if the lining is a lot bigger, then I can kind of cheat a bit, pull it off the end here, and then just take it in however much I need to make a difference so that it fits. If the lining is too small, you might have to do that same thing to the outer bag, but in that case I would do it a little bit to both sides. Good. So another pin in the middle here, making sure my edges come together at the top here. And then one more pin, the center edges here. Good. So I've got 4 pins coming around this circle. I'm going to take it back to the machine, starting at 1 pin. I'm going to back tack at the 15 line or 5/8 line, and I'm going to sew all the way around this circle right till I get back to where I started. At the 5/8 15 line. And stitch number 1, back tack. Keeping these edges together and just working my way around the circle. I want to keep the seam allowance open as I pressed it, so I'll just double check as it goes under the needle. And then lining right back up with where I started. Here's the fun part. I'm going to reach into that gap and pull the whole bag right side out. Awesome. Looks good. And if you think maybe you weren't at the 15 line, if you were sewing too close to the edge, double check. You don't want to have any little holes or gaps in this edge. If you do see a little hole or some raw edge poking out, don't try to fix it from the outside. You're going to have to go back into that gap, back in, find the hole, and fix it from the inside, okay? I can feel inside here that seam allowance is all going up toward the lining, and that's exactly what I want. And I want to push the lining away from it. I'm going to be pressing this edge, and I want it to be nice and flat. So I don't want any ridge from the lining. I want to get that lining all the way out. And same on the other side, flatten that right out, push the lining away from the bag so we get a nice edge. Good. And by flattening it out like that first, it makes it so much easier to get a nice edge in our next step. Push the lining all in now. And now because we flattened it out, we're going to be able to get a really good edge here at the top. I don't want to see the lining coming out. I want it just rolled, that little hair to the inside, just roll it inside. But I also don't want it too far in, and I don't want any little like dent in here. I really want to make sure that I got the seam right out at the edge there. To press this, I want to go around a little bit at a time so that I can make sure I'm organizing it as I go. It's really hard to get everything looking good and then pressing it all at once. So that's a nice edge. Looks good. Now I'm going to take it back to the machine again and sew around at the 15 line or 5/8 around that circle again, just to hold that nice edge. I'm also going to sew right where I left the gap. I'm just going to pull the ends tight here to bring those edges together and sew nice and close to the edge. I'll do that first so I don't forget it. Pull your ends, bring your edges together, and sew nice and close to the edge. Okay. Lining goes back in. Nice edge comes to the 15 line or 5/8 line, and I want to start and stop at the seam just so my back tack is sort of in a more logical place. But my back tack should be nice and small anyway. So there you go, the top edge has been sewn at the 15 line, nice and straight, looks good. This one, the flap, I'm going to do an edge stitch right from this upper corner here, nice and close to the edge. I'm going to do a pivot at the bottom corner, pivot, nice and clean pivots, and then come up. We'll move that slider out of the way, and then back tack at the top here. I'm not sewing across the top of this flap, not until we put it onto the bag. And you see how that bottom edge is rolling out? I definitely don't want to see that, so I'm going to roll it in before I edge stitch it. My rule is if it doesn't look good, don't sew it. Make it look good first. And then nice and slow as you go over the teeth. Slow as you come down to that bottom corner, sink your needle down right where you want to pivot. Adjust if you have to. Leave your needle down, lift up to pivot. And then we should be right back on the edge. Okay, and then the same situation, my metal stoppers are there. I want to be sewing close to the edge, so I want to be very mindful and come right in between. And remember, back tacking here, we're not sewing across the top edge of this yet. Awesome. So edge stitch with nice clean pivots like that. That's what we're aiming for, yeah? So putting the flap onto the bag, I want to lay the bag down with the zipper facing up, and then the flap goes down onto it so I can see both zippers. I'm going to center the flap over the pocket, and I just want to just barely cover that line that I just sewed. I'll be starting to sew up at the top there, so I'm going to point my pins toward the top. Of course, I'm just pinning to one side of the bag. I don't want to sew the whole bag closed. At the machine, I'm going to sew a line right where those pins are, like just at the edge of the flap. And then I'm going to come back in the opposite direction using my edge of my presser foot as a guide so that I get two parallel lines there. Making sure that the other side of the bag is well out of the way so I don't sew the whole bag closed. And just going to get that all underneath. It's a little bit awkward, but right there. I'm going to be aiming to sew right along the edge of the flap. And I want to just straighten this out so that it's just covering that first sewing line. So now the edge of my presser foot's going to ride right along that first line of sewing there. That looks pretty slick. I've got some threads to trim up, but I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty good. And now the only thing left is the strap. So for my polypropylene webbing, I want to cut one piece that is 55 inches long, or 1.4 meters, 140 centimeters. So that's my long one. And then one short strip that's just 6 inches long. 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Good. Now this polypropylene webbing frays like crazy. So if there's a thread sticking out like that, don't pull it because you will have nothing left. Instead, I'm going to use a lighter and I'm going to melt those so it heat seals it, all 4 of your edges. Now that is going to be hot for a second because obviously it was just on fire. So give that a second to cool. Okay, see how the slider curves in one way? This is definitely the underside, that's the top. I want to hold it with the slider facing up, and I'm going to put the webbing coming up and then back down into that same buckle, same slider. So that's pretty easy so far, right? Good. Okay, and have that slid up a little bit. Then I'm going to take the next slider, rounded side up. This time I'm just going to go right down into this. I'm not coming up into it like I just did. I'm going down into it. That one's just going to be kind of hanging off like this. And now I flip over onto the back. Good. And I want to loosen that first one off a little bit so that I can take this end and go back in and out. So in there and out there. Good. Okay. So now when I pinch these 2 layers together, that's how this can be adjustable. So that's where I want to sew. Don't make the mistake that I first did. I sewed this up above the buckle or above the slider, and then it's not adjustable at all. So don't make that mistake. Turn it down, pinch it, and make sure that you've got it right. You can slide it, right? And then you're going to be doing a nice strong back tack across those 2 layers, just those 2 layers. If you put it to the 3rd layer, then again, it's not adjustable anymore. So just those 2 layers. And then our little 6-inch piece goes through that extra little slot in that slider, and we'll pin here. So I'm going to do 2 nice strong back tacks there, and then I'm going to be able to sew this to the bag. back and forth a few times so it's nice and strong. And then here on this little one, you just have to kind of move everything out of your way so you know you're just sewing those 2 layers. And then again, nice strong back tack. Good. Awesome. So double check. Can you adjust it? Can you move it? Then you're good. Now to attach it to the bag, I'm going to find the good side. So this is definitely the good side of the strap. I don't want this side facing out, right? That doesn't look as nice. That's the side I want facing out. So I'm going to take that end, I'll trim my threads. I'm going to tuck that in behind the side seam, down about 1 inch. Good, and pin there. And then make sure it's not twisted. Make sure your strap is not twisted so you're finding which is the outside edge. Good, this is my outside edge. And I'm going to put that in behind the other side seam. And I'm just, before I sew, I'm going to double check that I have not twisted that strap. So when I pick it up, it should be nice and flat together. It's not twisted. Good. I'm going to do a nice strong back tack at the top of the bag. Then I'll go inside and do a back tack at the bottom of the strap. If you wanted, you could get fancy and do an X or a square, but I'm just going to do the 2 lines. And then guess what? Trim your threads and you are done. Okay, so there you go. I hope you had fun with that. If you got your messenger bag and your pencil case both finished, then congratulations. Those are 2 pretty ambitious beginner projects, but you did it, so good job. So thanks again for joining me today. It's really nice to have you along for the ride. If you liked that video, please subscribe, because then you'll get each of my videos as soon as they come out. And it'd be nice to have you for those as well. Okay, take care.